from Antlion Audio. And then we've got Valkrin, who's a LoL player and a pretty prestigious Twitch player. Do you want to give us a little background about your LoL background there, Valkrin?
Yeah, I played League since the beta. I started off as a YouTuber and I transitioned to a streamer, but that's where I am now. I'm just a high level player that also streams League of Legends full time.
Excellent, excellent. When you say high level, what kind of high level are we talking right now?
Challenger.
Excellent, excellent. Um, so, have you ever played on any teams or anything like that? Do you do any five-man queue ups or?
I used to. I usually just if I'm playing with a pre-made, it's just for solo queue and it's just for just friends and messing around usually.
Nice, nice. So in those like team kind of situations, or even in those mess around situations, do you guys use comms at all, like voice chat or any kind of software or anything like that?
Yeah, we'll usually use TeamSpeak or Skype for voice chat if we're in a pre-made
Okay,
for dynamic queue.
excellent. How do you guys normally structure those chats? Is it like a single person like making all the play calls because they've got like a vision, or is it more of like a democracy where everyone's kind of just, hey, I need help in this lane and such?
Yeah, it's definitely more of a democracy. If you're playing in like competitive play, you'll usually have like one person shot calling. But if it's a more casual game, you're just whoever's talking is talking, and it's usually not just one person shot calling.
Right. Okay. So in that kind of situation, when you have that many people talking and kind of doing those things, can it get a little chaotic in those chat rooms?
Yeah, it definitely has that moment where everybody tries to talk at once for a play and gets
Right.
really confusing. But usually, everybody will also get quiet the same like next second, just because it gets too chaotic sometimes when a play is happening, and then they start talking again.
Right. So in those plays, like what actual calls do you recommend people like? Is there some like shortcut calls you can use in those kind of situations, or things you'd recommend to beginners as calls they should listen for,
Yeah,
or
generally around objectives, like if you're like shot calling, you want to make sure that what you are saying is like clear and concise, because if you're trying to explain something really in depth when you only have a couple seconds, you need to definitely have like shortcuts. Um, some players will just like time summoner spells by typing it out. In voice chats, most of the time, um, the shortened phrases will just be like key terms like gank or counter gank or something along those lines, where the law players have created like definitions for um, like complex actions of a player.
right. Now, have you ever been in a situation where someone got that secondary pick and they just weren't comfortable? Like, how do you handle something like that? If someone's like, hey, I got ADC, I know I queued for it. I'm just really bad at this role. I just queued because I'm a better support. You know.
Right. No, that happens all the time. Sometimes swaps will happen where you'll just verbal confirmation in chat. Two people will be like, okay, well, if you can't do that, then I'll take that role. So it does happen sometimes, but it also can create a lot of conflicts if one player wants to swap and the other doesn't.
Right.
And the one person that's on the off roll definitely wants to swap, but he doesn't get it.
Right.
Sometimes, it does create a lot of conflict, and trolling happens, and players sometimes just throw the win on purpose because they didn't get what they wanted. But it's rarer than it used to be.
Now that's something I hear you talk about on your channel a lot. You really encourage people to step away from the toxicity and realize that it harms the whole team. And I think that's kind of interesting about your channel. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. When you like step away from the team environment and you actually start attacking your team verbally, Riot has claims and also apparently done studies that it lowers your chances of winning the game. And in personal experience, it definitely does. I know that for sure. But it's just some players will still know that and still just like, when they're frustrated, they'll let it out. But it does hurt your chances of winning the game by like yelling at your team, and if they're making mistakes, like pointing it out.
Right. So let's say I'm on a team that has one of those players on it. As a new player, what's my best course of action?
You don't have a lot of options. You usually just have to like mute them. There's an in-game function to mute them. There's also an out-of-game function when you're in Champion Select to ignore the person, and they'll be added to a list of they'll be permanently muted, so you wouldn't be able to see their chat anymore. That's really the only option you have, unless you are just going to deal with what they have to say and ignore it. But you can actually put them on the ignore list
Excellent.
if you don't want to deal with it.
So you would recommend not talking back to him, right? Like,
Oh, definitely. Yeah, you definitely wouldn't want to, like, there's no reason to, because, in the entire history of League, someone who's been, like, raging and toxic will never admit to it. Like, I've never seen that case where
right.
they're, like, they're mad, but then you're, like, you give them reason and logic for them to not be mad. Like, you prove them wrong. It doesn't matter. Like, they'll do whatever they can to avoid accepting, like, anything that goes against their own stance in that situation. So yeah, no reason to argue with them. You just mute them or ignore them in game.
Right. So, like, as a new player, I found myself the lack of like in-game communication, like kind of hard to like make lane changes and phase changes. And what are some habits you see like new players making that some bad habits you see often like that new players do, especially when it comes to communication?
It's definitely there's like a certain point in the game after laning phase where like both teams start grouping up, and it's tricky because the side lanes will definitely like be pushing one way or the other, and eventually someone has to go and deal with that, push it back, or you just like get a massive wave stacked up that pushes towards your tower. A lot of times players will just like kind of leave the group around mid lane and just go and try to clear out that farm. And then, there's that miscommunication where maybe the person didn't say they're going to get it, or the team didn't realize, the rest of them realized that one person left. And then suddenly, like, a fight will break out, and you'll be outnumbered because that one person left. And it can create a lot of strife between the team because it's so important for everyone to be a part of the fight if a fight's going to break out that late into the game, because one team fight, that the winning team can get Baron and win the game from, like, one push.
Right.
So one mistake and miscommunication can lead to one team just losing.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's an awesome point. So so the in-game features? I know there's pings and stuff. Is there like an etiquette to it? Is there like a good way or a good, you know what I mean? Like it's just
Yeah.
hard to really to get a grasp on it as coming in as a newbie.
It's difficult. Like there are the different types of pings. There's like assist me, missing ping, danger ping, on my way ping. Usually you want to be really accurate with the pings. So if you're pinging too much, it can like create a lot of like uncertainty between your team. Like the importance of like one ping versus like you can get maxed out on pings. Like there's just a certain point if you ping too much, you can't ping anymore for a little while.
I'd hope I never
So
find that point.
But yeah, you want to be really precise with which ping you try to use. A lot of times players will just spam the careful ping if they're just uncertain about something. And then sometimes people use the careful ping when they know for sure that like their laner is roaming, they should use the danger ping. And then sometimes people will just ping normally without like any commands, just the G left click, and you don't know what that means. Like you just see a
Right.
ping on the minimap, and if it's not one of the specific pings, you don't know what that meant. Like go there, don't go there.
Right.
So yeah, there are definitely some times that I've been confused and died because random pings at incorrect times, and you don't know what's going on. Like if you mess up a ping, it can hurt your team.
Right. So, so I notice you do a lot of like almost coaching of your own play after some of your streams and stuff.
Hmm.
Um, how important is that kind of communication side of teamwork compared to like the mechanical skills of the game? So like being able to break that stuff down and communicate that kind of stuff. How important is it to be able to see that as compared to just being skilled?
Like I kind of break it down between two things, like the mechanical side of the game and then the decision making side of the game. And you can't really teach a player to be mechanically good. Like you can show them the keystrokes that they're supposed to use in what order, and then just reaction time and like when to use it and how to use it and how quickly to use it. That's something that a player will just have to pick up on their own. But what can be actively taught and communicated to other players is usually just the decision making side of the game, like where to be on the map at what time and why. But because that's like a really big component of the game, it's also what you will actively communicate with your team. because it's really the only thing that can change. Like you can tell someone that they messed up a combo with their spells or something like that, but even if you tell them how to do it the right way, it doesn't matter. But
Right.
you can just tell them to be somewhere at a certain time, and that's just much easier to correct in a shorter period of time.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. So I assume that's why you spend so much time in your channel, like explaining those kind of things, why you made those kind of moves, so people understand that. So
Definitely, yeah.
I really appreciate it. Is there any other thoughts on communication as a whole you want to share with players or new players, or just the community?
I think you can climb the ladder without. You can definitely climb the ladder without having like direct communication with your team. Like you don't have to be in voice chat to climb the ladder. It definitely can help. With dynamic queue now in League of Legends, you could potentially find 4 players in your bracket of play, and group up and go into TeamSpeak or whatever voice comm that you want to use, and you'll have an advantage. But you don't have to do that. You can definitely use in-game commands, the chat, and whatnot. So it's just about knowing what you're comfortable with. If you feel like you'd play better if you and your team could actively talk to each other, then you have that option. If you don't want to talk to someone else, it doesn't matter because it's not built into the game. So you've got a lot of options. If you don't want to communicate with someone, you could mute them. You definitely want to communicate more, you could organize like a pre-made group and go into
Right.
voice chat if you really want to.
What would be your feelings on integrating voice chat into League of Legends?
I think that it would be a really good and bad idea depending on where on the ladder you were. If you were, looking to take your game to the next level and you were already really high up in the ladder, maybe potentially looking to join a challenger team and eventually try to make it to the LCS, then voice comms and integrated with League of Legends would be important because that's what you have to do. Like the pro teams, there is no pro team out there that doesn't use voice comms.
Right.
Like when they're scrimming or when they're actually in their tournament games. So that should just go and show you that it is the best way.
Right.
Like the absolute best way used by the pros is voice comms. And if that was simulated, it would be easier transition for players to play the game at the highest level. But at the lower levels of play, like the players that are just starting out in the ladder, it would probably not start off being a good experience because, if you're just starting out the game or you've been playing for a while and you're either not taking it serious or you don't know how to get better. A lot of times voice comms will just create a lot more conflict. You'll be making calls, but they might not be the right calls. They might lead to more losses. But at the highest level of play, voice comms would be very, very valuable. For newer players, I would say that it could be good eventually, but because of those other elements that could cause conflict, it probably wouldn't be good in the short term.
So maybe a platinum lockout on it. It unlocks at platinum.
I would say, basically, yeah.
Maybe higher.
Maybe higher. You might want it a lot higher, but platinum's known for its toxicity.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, excellent. Well, hey, I really want to thank you for your time, and I want to give you a chance to plug your channel. Can you tell everyone where they can come watch you?
Sure. Yeah, it's twitch.tv/Valkrin, and YouTube is /the Valkrin, and then social media is Twitter, Facebook is /Valkrin too.
Excellent. Well, hey, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today, and you have a wonderful night.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, buddy.